Well, you're borrowing it.
But it's on. It's a whole bunch of.
I'm borrowing this.
Oh, geez.
Will Senate please come to order?
I hope we don't vote on anything, 'cause we're gonna lose.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to bring up pending notice SR 16, S 127, an act relating to housing development, and H 321, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis amendments for immediate action.
Senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up action pending entry on the notice calendar, SR 16, S 127, and H 321. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, motion carries. We have SR 16, but the presenter of SR 16 is not here. This is what, first reading? Oh, this, okay. We have on the notice calendar SR 16, introduced on May 30 of 25, was referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which reports it has considered the resolution and recommends that it ought to be adopted. Listen to the second reading of the resolution.
SR 16, Senate resolution opposing recent federal actions that threaten public health and urging their swift reversal.
Recognize the senator from Chittenden Central, Senator Gulick, for the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the Health and Welfare Committee, we focus on public health outcomes and the social determinants of health, among other things. And we thought it was important to highlight the impacts of federal decisions on Vermont and on Vermonters. We believe this resolution represents some of our concerns regarding our efforts to combat disease. Disease does not respect borders, so decisions that are made to cut funding to the World Health Organization may jeopardize the health of Vermonters as disease outbreaks spread from region to region. With 20,000 positions being eliminated from the Center for Disease Control, teams are cut that work on preventing injuries and violence from causes including motor vehicle crashes, child maltreatment, traumatic brain injury. With these cuts, we may see diminished tracking of trends in mental health and substance use disorders, rape prevention and education, and maternal and child health. With cuts to the Center for Tobacco Products and the Food and Drug Administration, we may see negative impacts, and we may see tobacco companies seize the opportunity to capitalize on loosened oversight. As you know, we've talked about it before, there are $1 billion worth of cuts in the Department of Education that will be targeted specifically at mental health services. We know that that's something impacting Vermont and specifically, frankly, our property taxes, which are tied to education. So this is something that we also wanted to highlight. As you know, relying on scientific research and information is critical in public health decisions. So we are excited to bring this resolution forward to, just share the awareness with the Senate. And we did vote this out of our committee 4-0-1. And we thank the Senate and hope that you will concur with this resolution. And thank you, Mr. President.
It says, I understand there is an amendment to be offered?
This is the amendment.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have an amendment. So is the question third time? That was an amendment. All right, so the question is, shall the resolution be amended as offered by Senator Gulick and others? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I request a recess for Republican caucus?
We'll take a brief recess. Whoops, sorry, Chrissy. Will the Senate please come to order? There are some issues with drafting and this document, so we will be passing over this resolution for now. I will save that for later. Senator from, oh, no, Okay, we have S-127, an act relating to housing and development. Chris, conference, I got it right here. The Committee of Conference has submitted the report and it is not found in your calendar today. It's being handed out, and the question is, shall the Senate accept and adopt the report of the Committee of Conference? What am I looking for?
Thank you, kind sir.
Who's doing it? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to do my best to offer a fluff to you all. Bottom line up front, you are about to vote on a $2 billion infrastructure program for the state of Vermont. I tend to wax poetic about housing. This is perhaps the third major housing bill we are bringing you in 3 short years. But there is nothing more fundamental to the built environment of the economy than our infrastructure. Infrastructure is something that can clean up water, can make things accessible for people, can get us through climate events, and importantly, can grow our economy and, in this case, our opportunities to create housing. There's a whole report here that I will refrain from going through fully. I do want to say on behalf of my fellow conferees, the senior senator from Windsor and the senator from Chittenden North, this was a eventful conference committee. And you all passed an initial proposal in CHIP, Community and Housing Infrastructure Program, that was incredibly flexible and wide open, knowing that throughout the process we would set some parameters around it, but with the promise to Vermonters that it would actually be something that could help build infrastructure and invest capital in all of our communities, from Burlington to Barton, from Fairhaven. I always draw a blank when I'm trying to remember, to Vernon. We hope that what this does is put tax increment financing, a tool that's used in 48 states and has been used for a long time in our largest downtowns and village centers, that we can make this available to any community who can put a project together with partners. Throughout the process of the bill winding its way through several House committees and landing in conference, I think some very meaningful but economically focused parameters have been placed around this tax financing program. First, the program will last until 2035, as it currently stands. It has a sunset at that point that we could extend, but we are looking at 10 years of communities being able to take on increment retention in order to invest in these infrastructure projects. There was some discussion and debate about whether this program was ready to be the replacement for our traditional tax increment financing program, and if that should also sunset. And that was not the wishes, that had not even been pondered, honestly, in Senate Finance. It was not the wishes of the Senate in any draft, and was not the wishes of the communities, certainly, that still have TIFs operating. So the TIF program will not be sunsetting. That is stripped from the bill. We had a lot of debate about the amount of increment a project can retain. I won't go too much into the details of that, but we gave an extra boost in the increment retention for affordable housing projects. It's a 75-85 split. So there's monies that are directed to helping to administer the program. There are monies that are directed immediately to the education fund. But you do need a meaningful ability to retain increment to actually take advantage of the overall benefit of the dollars that are being invested. So that 75-85 was at play quite a bit with the idea of how many projects we would attempt to fund. Our chamber, as I recall, left that question pretty wide open, mostly because we have a but-for test that's fairly robust, that the project would not have happened or would not have happened in the same way but for this investment. But we knew that this would be new exposure to the education fund, and that we needed to perhaps give people more comfort with where we would land and how much we were trying to buy in terms of infrastructure for the state. The number had gone as low in the House as $40 million of approved increment every year. And that was arrived at by talking about 1 penny in the year 2025 on the property tax. But I would submit to you that $40 million, which then has a percentage that's retained to actually support the project, does not go very far in 2025, and certainly not when tariffs begin to hit and labor costs continue to rise. And certainly not where we are trying to break perhaps new ground in our rural communities that don't have a lot of infrastructure. There was at one time a proposal to have no cap. And we certainly think there are other parameters in the bill that would make it possible not to have a cap, including the time and capacity of our communities and our VEPC board to actually accommodate these applications and make sure they meet the but-for test, and that they would be able to return ultimately a greater amount to the grand list than that parcel is able to return now. So we landed in conference on a $200 million cap. And I will tell you how we arrived at that with some quick math, but I think still careful math that had been debated all session, around a cost of about $50,000 per unit to build infrastructure. We wish it was less, and that cost per unit goes down the more units you build over that infrastructure. But that is still a very affordable investment for us to get a unit of housing back in the state. So at $50,000 per unit and needing 7,500 units per year to have healthy vacancy rates and meet our housing needs as a state, we got to close to 400 million that would be needed. And we determined that perhaps up to half of our communities would be able to submit an application and take advantage of this program. It is very unlikely, I would say, that we are going to reach that $200 million cap in any year. But I would posit to you this: if this program truly works and has that much increment available for projects, you can then make a meaningful investment in a large project in our population centers and know that you are all but guaranteed a strong return on that investment. I will give you an example. South Burlington has seen between 1% to 3% grand list growth in its larger community. In their TIF district, they have seen 52% grand list growth. You're not going to be able to achieve that in every community, but in our communities where we know people want to live and the demand for projects is extremely high, you are going to have a low-risk project that returns great investment to the education fund. And here's the real beauty of that, Mr. President, which is we wouldn't be able to fund smaller, riskier projects in rural areas unless we knew we were getting that return on investment from some of our larger economic engines. So truly, Mr. President, I believe we landed somewhere artfully and elegantly where we can go home to our communities and say, you can submit an application. You can take advantage of a program that has pretty much only been available to 16, 17 communities in our state otherwise. A lot of people talk about whether or not we should, quote unquote, take from the education fund to fund economic development, investment, and in this case, infrastructure. And I would ask you this. If you looked at your budget and you never put anything aside to fix your roof, to keep your basement dry, to renovate your bathroom, what you have is a home that ultimately is decaying in value. If we do not invest in our grand list, if we do not invest in the kind of infrastructure that grows the grand list around the state, that makes new opportunities available for people to live here, and as my colleague from Chittenden North would point out, spend money on the sales tax, generate income on the payroll tax for the state, generate other types of revenue, then we are not growing, we are decaying. Mr. President, we've been rightly focused on the education bill for much of this session, but there's only one way to get healthy grand list growth, and that is to grow the grand list. Not have ever increasing costs of housing where your reappraisal shows that your house is worth that much more because there's just simply not enough housing stock in your area or in the state. You want healthy grand list growth that shares that property tax commitment or burden across more people, or at least a growing number of people, including young families. So with that, Mr. President, I would just also add that we have some other key provisions in this bill. Some of you have actually received maybe more communication about migrant fair housing. And I'm very proud that we have been able to, in a very bipartisan fashion this entire session, advance non-discrimination principles for immigration status and citizenship in our fair housing and public accommodation statutes. This furthermore takes a new provision that was discussed among the stakeholders that you have to be able to offer any applicant for housing the ability to use either their social security number, their tax identification number, or a government-issued ID to help conduct background checks of any kind, credit, criminal history, et cetera. Most forms automatically ask for a social security number. And the second part of this provision would say you can no longer make that a required part of an application. You can still have it on the application, doesn't have a star next to it that says required, doesn't say everything has to be filled out or this is an incomplete application. You can give that person the opportunity to show other ways of presenting and confirming their identity. There are probably some other things in here that I'm sure people are not as interested in. So with that, Mr. President, I just want to say this was a particularly historic conference committee on something that I think will benefit many, many of our communities and our entire Vermont economy. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that our chair and the senior senator from Windsor missed the opening dinner of her son's wedding to negotiate this last night. So we were incredibly committed to not walking away from the table and getting this done. And we bring S-127 to you with all 6 conferees signing and hope you will concur.
The question is, shall the Senate accept and adopt the report of the Committee of Conference? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask a question of the reporter of the conference?
The reporter is interrogated.
When you said,
Senator?
50,000 yes,
Senator, you said you, and you need to address the president
My
and ask, did the senator?
Thank you, Mr. President. Is the senator referring to a unit that costs $50,000? Can she give me a definition?
Can the senator give me a
Can the
definition?
senator give me a definition of a unit? Does it consist of a bedroom, one bedroom, a kitchen, a bath?
Mr. President, I thank the senator for the question, and we have this discussion in conference committee because it's one of my favorite discussions to have, that you have your sunk costs, your overhead costs for a project, and then the more densely you build the project, the lower the cost per unit of the infrastructure. So we've looked at information in our committee that demonstrates to us that Vermont spends about 50% more on our affordable housing projects, 50, than New Hampshire and Maine. You cannot find huge differences in the cost of labor, the cost of materials. You just find maybe people call Vermont with its regulations a 15% markup. But any barriers or processes that reduce significantly the density of a project significantly drive up the cost per unit of that project. So all told, on average right now across the state, you're spending about $650,000 to $800,000 per unit of affordable housing. That number is not that much lower for privately built housing, maybe somewhere between $400,000 and $650,000. When we talk about building infrastructure, the good news is infrastructure in and of itself is a public good. You can use the same amount of infrastructure for 3 units of housing with some bigger pipes and some more, bells and whistles. You can use that same infrastructure for 25 units of housing. For example, one of the projects that has been discussed as perhaps able to take advantage of this new form of TIF program, this CHIP program, is the Hula project in Burlington. And I know sometimes we in Burlington get a bad reputation, but they are looking at 1,200 or more units of housing, none of which would be funded by CHIP. But what they are looking at funding CHIP with is, is infrastructure that would help manage the stormwater runoff of the entire south end neighborhood of Burlington that they are in, which folks who know that area know it has former EPA sites. It has a lot of paved surface, doing an incredible service for Lake Champlain. They are also looking at this infrastructure program for transportation and multimodal infrastructure. The group that is part of that particular project is called Ride Your Bike. And it's one of the partners in the project that is specifically focused on a very well-designed, I can't say more because this is not, transportation is not my passion, but a particularly state-of-the-art parking structure that also has bike availability, alternative transportation hub, electric vehicle charging stations, mass timber framing that can one day be turned into housing potentially, or stories can be added to it. So there's a lot of, I don't want to focus solely on Burlington, but there's a lot of exciting stuff that's possible when you build infrastructure. And the more infrastructure you build and the more housing you allow, the lower the cost per unit of housing, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. So let me rephrase the question if I may. So this is not a standalone unit for a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bath. This is for $50,000 per unit. I'm just trying to figure out, get my mind wrapped around the calculation. How many people are gonna, is this a 50-unit dwelling that has 50 times, 50,000 times 50?
Mr. President?
Mr. President.
So it's a fair question, Mr. President. $50,000 per unit is the average cost. We were presented by the Champlain Housing Trust. That has not been disputed fully throughout the process. There are those who would say you can get good infrastructure for $45,000 a unit, upwards of $75,000, $80 a unit. Ultimately, in a more rural area of the state, you are simply going to have a higher cost per unit. You are not going to be building 1,200 units of housing. You're going to be building maybe 20 to 30 units of housing. You still need a lot of investment in that infrastructure. Certainly not on the scale of cleaning up Lake Champlain, but possibly an area where you're breaking new ground and you need at least $10 to $15 million of infrastructure in order to accommodate, say, 30 units of housing. So you get economies of scale when you go up from that, but the average project we are talking about might, for example, have in the multi-million dollars of infrastructure costs, and that is likely not to all be borne by the CHIP program, just a part of it. But that investment tends to yield a larger amount of housing than you can get without significant and robust underground infrastructure. Mr. President, I hope I am now getting closer to answering the senator's question.
I thank the reporter, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter of the conference report?
The senator from Chittenden is interrogated.
Thank you. I'm wondering if any testimony was taken about the impact to the education fund of this expanded TIF idea.
Mr. President, I would say in the several committees this has gone through, that was a major topic of discussion, as well as the major topic of discussion of the conference committee. A $2 billion infrastructure investment over 20 years out of the education fund yields about $2.66 billion in new general fund, grand list growth and increment, education fund, I should say. So we are looking at about a, for every, this is where I'd like to, the senator from Chittenden North was our numbers guy, but we looked at multiple spreadsheets, one of which we can certainly get for the senator or others later tonight, that demonstrates how much money you are investing in infrastructure, which remains in the ground and is still visible and usable for all. Then how much that adds to the education fund over time. At the peak in about 2050, we would be using $112 million of increment and yielding about $150 million of revenue to the education fund. So about a $38 to $40 million difference at its peak in 2050 for the both expenditure and the return from this program.
Thank the senator.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know where we are in the process, but I want to just make an observation on some of the language that I'm noticing about the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainable Fund, or Sustainability Fund, is that what it's called? When we talked about, Sustainability Fund. When we talked about this in appropriation and appropriated the $7.5 million for it, we were very clear that it was a revolving loan fund. I see language in here that the bond bank, together with Department of Housing and Community Development, can decide that it's a forgivable loan, and a forgivable loan is not going to be revolving. That's basically a grant. And I heard from my seatmate that this was language in the Senate bill, so I think I just missed it when it came through the Senate before. But I just wanted to say on the record, I'm concerned about this revolving loan fund being able to turn these loans into forgivable loans without any context of how they're going to make that decision. Might be something we want to address next year, I just wanted to express my concern about that number 5 under G, that could happen. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate accept and adopt the report of the Committee of Conference? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have accepted the report of the Committee of Conference on S-127. We now have H-321, the Committee of Conference. Is this a Committee of Conference? The House has considered the Senate proposal of amendment and has concurred therein with further proposal of amendment. The question is, shall the Senate concur in the House proposal of amendment to the Senate proposal of amendment? What do we have on this one? Cannabis. Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular bill, H-321, relates to cannabis. And there was an amendment that the Senate prepared, sent over to the House, and the House's return, and the document that you have in front of you today is what the House returned. With respect to the various amendments, rather than going through all of them, since we've gone through all of them about a week and a half ago, I'll only deal with the amendments that, or the pieces of the amendment that are being struck or changed. The first one is striking out Section 4 of the bill. And what Section 4 of the bill that was removed by the House amendment established a rulemaking authority over a new trim and harvest type of license. Established license criteria for this change in ownership, control, or location of a cannabis establishment, and required the Cannabis Control Board to consider regional population and local input when allowing a new retail license location. The bill was struck, or this piece of the bill was struck, principally because of the addition of the trim and harvest licensing category. There was an issue that the board had in terms of its capacity to do all the things that were being requested, since its staffing was not increased as they had requested as part of the bill. The Cannabis Control Board agreed, the House agreed as well, that it was not necessary to have this particular trim and harvest license type, that the ability to trim and harvest existed as it does now, principally using outside labor. The second thing to be deleted was Section 8. And what Section 8 established was creating the trim and harvest license type, again, in more detail, and authorize this type to operate at multiple locations. The next piece that was changed was Section 11, which was deleted. And Section 11 created the trim and harvest license type. We did a great job of putting it in at least 3 times so no one would miss it. And the last thing was Section 12. And in Section 12, it struck out in its entirety and included nothing beyond it. And the fifth area of amendment, it deleted sections 15A and 15B, and that permitted the Cannabis Control Board to permit up to 5 cannabis showcase events, sort of like farmers markets around the state. There were members of the House committee examining this that were concerned about the dangers and the presence of these additional showcase events may be seen to promote the use of cannabis rather than doing otherwise. It was intended by its owners to promote the use of cannabis, but there was a concern in the House that this was not the thing that the state ought to do. The committee met and looked at this proposal, and we concurred with their proposal. There were things such as, and principally the trim and harvest license event, that when the Cannabis Control Board was better staffed, it had less pressure on it, we could come back to that and look at it a second time, but it was not essential for the operation of the board or of the market in the short term. And we recommend to the body on a vote by the committee of 401 to accept the House's proposal amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the Senate concur in the House proposal of amendment to the Senate proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And we have concurred in the House proposal of amendment of the Senate proposal of amendment. Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I would like to recommit the Gulick Lyons Resolution SR 16 to Health and Welfare, please, Mr. President.
The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate recommit SR 16 to the Committee on Health and Welfare. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and SR 16 has been recommitted. Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the actions taken on S-127, an act relating to housing and housing development, to the governor forthwith.
The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message our actions on S-127 to the governor forthwith. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Senator from Chittenden.
At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the actions just taken on H-321, an act relating to miscellaneous cannabis amendments, to the House forthwith.
The senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message our actions on H-321 to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we are rapidly reaching the end of all of our work with one asterisk, and a rather large one. So with that said, Mr. President, I will ask that pending further announcements, the Senate stand in adjournment until 8:30. And the intention is to allow people a chance to get dinner, come back. We may have more action from the House and/or news from our conference committee. Thank you.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Orleans.
Mr. President, we've had a truly long day, and I think we're going to have an even longer one, so I wanted to share some good news as a point of personal privilege, if I may.
You may.
I rise today to share a bit of hopeful and heartwarming news, the kind that reminds us, in the midst of our long days in this building, today certainly was one, why the work we do matters so deeply to the families of Vermont. For those of you who aren't already aware, which I believe is a very small amount because gossip in this building travels like water, my wife and I are expecting our first child this coming fall, a boy. For many years, we believed that we might never have this chance because of significant fertility concerns. But after years of uncertainty and hope, we've been blessed. Even though we're months away, we certainly feel his presence already, especially my wife, who's become very familiar with his kicking. Apparently, he already has strong opinions. Maybe he has a future as a senator, and I'll still love him if he's a House member or a governor or those things. I'm grateful. We're celebrating him not only for the joy he's brought, but as a powerful reminder that hope endures and that sometimes dreams come true. And even though he's not already here, I want him to know that I love him and I'm already proud of him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Lamoille.
Mr. President, I think we can hear the excitement in the senator from Orleans and his other half who is here in the chamber. And I would move that the remarks of the senator from Orleans be journalized.
Senator from Chittenden.
Withdraw my previous motion and second the motion to journalize the senator's remarks.
I'm not sure which senator at this point has the motion on the floor to journalize. Okay. Even though the other senator withdrew his motion afterwards. Okay. Perfect. The senator from Lamoille has moved that the Senate journalize the remarks of the senator from Orleans. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have journalized the remarks of the senator from Orleans. Senator from Chittenden.
And with that, Mr. President, I would restate my original motion, which is that pending further announcements, the Senate stand in adjournment until 8:30 PM.
The senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate stand in recess
In recess.
until 8:30 PM. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will stand in recess until 8:30 PM.